Thank you, David.
Thanks, Dave.
Our next speaker is John Pash, who's going to talk about the efforts that are ongoing at Department of Water Resources and its to improve the local emergency response programs. John?
Mr. Pash?
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Chairman Eisenberg. Thank you, council members, and thank you, council staff, for the opportunity for our program, the Delta Flood Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Recovery Program, to brief the Delta Stewardship Council. It's been 25 months since our last briefing to the council, and in that time we've had meetings with your staff, but we definitely want to take this opportunity to brief you on two specific agenda items that we've got here that are improving the operational capacity of the state and local flood emergency responders to respond to a catastrophic flood event in the Delta. I've got some additional introductions to make. I have two of my staff, some engineers.
The guys who are looking in the back in suits like they've got bags of money? Are those the guys?
Well, they don't have bags of money, but what they do have are updated slides that we want to make sure the council members had.
Well, better updated slides than nothing.
So they'll be passing out those slides, and they'll be what we have are two
Are these instead of the two handouts?
Exactly, instead of those two handouts.
Are there secrets in the two handouts we got before that are not in the new one?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, members, this is Delta Flood Emergency Response - Facilities Improvement Project, same date, October 24, 2013. There are 14 pages of slides in this, and this will be posted on our website as a submitted document.
Yeah, I hope so, and I also I hope we can get through those slides. They're very brief and they're very informative, not only for the council and your staff, but also to the public that may be tuning into this council meeting. Before we get into the slides, I know there may be some general questions about the program at large. So also with me is my supervisor and the program manager for the Delta Flood Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Recovery Program, Bill Croyle.
There he is. And Mr. Fiorini reminded me that way back in 2010 we had a little subcommittee, and you appeared, I think you appeared at that time. Bill appeared at that time on this exact same subject. This was an update, so good.
So if there's no questions at the beginning of our slides, I'm going to introduce Anthony Novacero, who's going to present on the Facilities Improvement Project, which is a component of our program to construct waterside transfer facilities and stockpile facilities in the Delta.
Okay. Was it Mr. Ontero? Did I hear that correctly?
Anthony Novacero.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chairman, council members, staff.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate the opportunity to give this presentation on the Facilities Improvement Project, one of the components of the Delta Flood Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Recovery Program. Next slide, please. This slide just points out the many components that we have of the program. At the top right is the Facilities Improvement Project that we'll be speaking of today.
Could I suggest a shorter, more understandable acronym than DFEPRRP?
I'll tell you what, I won't speak about it much. I'll go right into the Facilities Improvement Project. This next slide just highlights some of the recommendations we pulled out of the Delta Plan that shows that not only our program, but our components are in alignment with what the recommendations are from the Delta Plan, and specifically about emergency stockpiles in the Delta for regional response. So the Facilities Improvement Project purpose basically is to manage residual risk. The project will increase the immediate operational capacity to respond to Delta flood events and assist in recovery from catastrophic flooding and levee failures in the Delta. The project has three main tasks. The initial one is basically to establish it as a project through the California Environmental Quality Act. The CEQA process helped us assess the environmental impacts and develop mitigation measures. So we've completed this first task. We're moving on to task 2, which is the site acquisition and construction. And the purpose is to purchase or develop memorandums of understanding or agreement or lease options.
Did you do a master environmental impact report for multiple projects?
We wrapped every project into one CEQA document.
Got it. And that has been reviewed, approved?
That has been reviewed, went through public review and approved.
Okay.
Yes. And the Delta Stewardship Council staff has recommended it. Anyway, back to task 2, the site acquisition and construction task. We're also looking to develop construction plans and actually go to construction. And then the third task is to make it operational ready to purchase stockpile materials and floodlight supplies. So to go into further depth of what we've done with the CEQA document, the Facilities Improvement Project initial study / mitigated negative declaration basically fulfilled the CEQA requirements to make this a viable project for the department. It described the selection process, evaluated the multiple sites, and provided preliminary site plans. Through this process, we developed mitigation measures that you see listed above. Some examples of biological resources where we will do some studies on sensitive species like burrowing owls or swans and hawks. We'll also do our wetland delineations, and basically the document is prepared so that we can avoid sensitive areas. Other mitigation measures are hydrology and water quality measures, such as best management practices pre and post construction, as well as noise mitigation measures to put sound dampening devices on our equipment and to work in regular, normal construction hours. The document also described over 200 sites. Both were public and private sites. And I'll note that the private sites were on the market for sale. There's no talk of condemnation or anything like that. The document further narrowed it down to 9 specific sites, of which we recommended 3 specific sites that we'll talk about today. One is Rio Vista in Solano County, Weber Avenue in Stockton, San Joaquin County, and in Brannan Island State Recreational Area in Sacramento County.
Correct my memory, but
Yes, sir.
these sites will be not identical, but comparable to the existing sites for emergency response that are around the Delta?
Not only will they be comparable, but they may extend our capacity to do more responsibilities.
I understand that. There are, what, 3 now, and this will add 3?
There are 2 existing facilities right now.
Right.
The one at the Port of Stockton has 113,000 tons of rock,
Right.
and Rio Vista has 100,000 tons of rock.
Department of Water Resources did something in terms of storing, if not a lot of rock, sandbags, emergency response equipment, and something else somewhere I faintly recall from.
We have multiple areas where we have flip pipe materials, Twitchell Island, and even in Southern California as well.
Sorry.
So this next slide shows the preliminary site plan that was included in the CEQA document, and it outlines specific enhancements or improvements that we're looking at Rio Vista. Like I mentioned, there's 100,000 cubic tons of rock. We're going to add another 40,000 cubic tons of material out there, the capacity to have flood fight containers that could roll off and be deployed, as well as padded areas where we can bring remote trailers in for incident command posts. The next preliminary site plan is the Stockton-West Weber site plan in San Joaquin County. Just like the capacity that the Rio Vista site will have, this one actually has water transfer facilities where we can use conveyors or cranes to move material from landside to barges that we can flood fight events from the water side as well. In addition, this specific site was selected because there's an existing slip where we can access barges. There's stadium lighting to keep the site lit 24 hours a day. And additionally, it's near Interstate 5, so it's easy access to it. The last preliminary site plan is Brannan Island State Recreational Area. Very similar improvements proposed here as we were in West Weber in Stockton. This particular project we will do in conjunction with the Department of Parks and Recreation, and we're looking forward to working with them on an MOU, MOA to develop these sites, or this site. One of the last slides here is the program budget, or excuse me, the project budget. This past fiscal year, we've allocated about $5.2 million towards mostly site acquisition. The next two fiscal years, 2013-14 and 14-15, are allocated. The core of the money is allocated for preparing plans and specifications, and actually go into construction and site improvements. And with the last fiscal year, 2015-16, we look to finish up those construction improvements and start stockpiling floodplain materials.
Are all of the years of activities for these projects funded now, or money earmarked for them?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
So in moving forward with the council, we look forward to working with council staff and members to basically move our project forward. We look for the Delta Stewardship Council to give approval of the construction projects that we talked about today, but that resolution will be later on. We'll work with it on that. And if you have any questions or anything, or want more information, we do have a website. That's the last page there. It talks about our program and all the components that are on it.
A couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
You're stretching my memory some 25 months to the last time we had a presentation about this. As I recall, all rock is not equal in Delta, and that the rock that you're stockpiling is for breaches in levees and not necessarily usable for slumps in the levee system. Is that correct?
Well, the rock that we do have now is specific. It's 24-inch minus rock. It's a certain specification used for channel closures or maybe improving or protecting islands from failure. The material that we talked about in the CEQA document will be a variety of different material. It would be rock, sand, soil, all kinds of different material.
There was a request issued 25 months ago by some of the reclamation districts wondering if you couldn't stockpile, essentially borrow pits that they could extract from because they lacked some of the storage space, and that they could replenish as they took it away. Did anything ever come of that request?
Oh.
I'll take that one.
Do I remember the topic correctly?
Yeah, that's been a topic actually in discussion for almost 5 years. In just a few minutes, you'll hear Zach talk a little bit about our grant program, and I think so. The goal is, as we've worked with the engineers and the various Delta interests to work through that issue. It's not as easy as people think. It kind of gets into we can stockpile a lot of get-started material, huge piles. We started a little bit of that with our channel closure rock, which is Anthony just mentioned. The challenge is how you manage that during the event and how you replace the material, and that's where some of the issues are. And so, but we can talk more about that as part of our grant program, and you'll see that come up as one of our approaches to deal with that as a whole, with the whole emergency management community in the Delta.
Okay. My last question is, if these three sites are fully stocked and they were in place in June of 2004, would it have altered the outcome of Jones Tract?
I don't think I'm prepared to answer that question.
This is why Bill sat in the back to start with, because he remembers he got these kinds of questions 2 years ago.
And I got great staff to help me that are doing actually all the hard work. That's a very good question. I think actually part of our challenge is being ready to move fast, right? That's essentially our effort in working with not only the local levee maintained agencies, but the local county operational areas, emergency managers at the county level, ourselves, and our Army Corps and our federal partners, being FEMA. Like the Weber site, and we can talk a little bit more about that if we have time, will be our ready-to-go site. So we'll have our get-started materials on site, conveyors in place, we can flip the switches and start to go. I don't presently have that capacity, even though I have a pile of rock sitting at Stockton, the Port of Stockton, and a conveyor. It's going to take me 48 hours to ramp that, install it, and turn it on. That's because of some of the mitigation measures that were put in place because of noise and those across the waterway. To me, that doesn't really work. I need to have something. When you call for the ambulance, I need to roll the ambulance. And so that's kind of our approach at looking at all three of these sites. On the north side, the central Delta, both Sacramento and San Joaquin River being Brannan Island, and then also Weber. And so to the extent that we can have those ready to go, get started sites, and obviously a duration of a large event is going to take kind of the material feeds to be set up, get operational, and bring those available materials in from whether it's the coast or the bay or the mountain communities to feed, say, rock or even the sediment stockpiles of. It's not just rock. It's got to be a wide variety of materials. So to answer your question, I think it would be faster to be able to get materials in place, whether it was by water or by land to that, because we'd have, again, that get started materials. The faster you can stop the expansion of that breach, the more apt you are to be able to get in and close it quicker. Now, can I stop the island from flooding? Not in that scenario.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Ms. Gray.
Slide 7, you have cultural resources listed as a mitigation measure. Can you expand on that, or did you already make comments on it? What does that mean?
I can expand a little bit on it. Basically, the CEQA document determined certain mitigation measures that we would avoid sensitive areas, and so the cultural resources mitigation measure would have to do a survey of any cultural significance in certain areas on the sites, and then we would look to avoid or keep any improvements out of those areas.
Can you give me an example? What kind of?
I can't speak of one specifically because we haven't done the evaluations yet or the studies, but for instance, if there was a job site where there were American arrowheads founded on the site, then you would have to stay clear of that area, that cultural sensitive area.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Anthony, thanks for this presentation. It's really very informative. And one of the questions I had is, one of our charges, of course, is to have a broad perspective of the Delta and be maintaining that perspective and actually looking at the emergency preparedness question, which is why you're here. So the question I have is, having completed this, I mean, where are you in the overall strategic look at emergency preparedness for the Delta? What other things are you hoping to achieve, and what can the Stewardship Council help you with?
Well, I think this component is just one of them, having actual materials, physical materials out in the Delta for a quicker response, but there's other aspects of that where we need better communication, and we're working through that with grants, working with the Delta counties, working with the Delta Working Group, where we actually have quarterly meetings to keep the flow of conversation and communication open. How the council can actually assist us on that. I think the first step would be, once we do come to you with specific construction projects, the approval of that would assist us so that we can actually fund these projects and actually go to construction. I don't know, Bill, do you want to elaborate any more actions that could be taken?
I have a whole list of things that are more strategic, things that we've, since we were last here, a lot of things that we have been doing and kind of expanding our scope. And actually some of them have pretty significant impact, I think, because of this program and the conversations, collaborations that has been started that, in my view, in many cases hadn't occurred before. I'd love to table that question for just a moment to make sure we, in the context of once Anthony's got all his questions addressed, and hear from about our grant program, and then I'd be happy to, to the extent we have time, kind of get into some of those a couple of these are kind of icy watershed actions, major milestones that we've been working through this last year. I think some of them speak to some of the concerns and comments we heard, a couple years ago over the last year. Some of them are real time, like just this past 3 or 4 weeks. And so we've have a lot of partners. We have partners sitting right next to me. And so I can certainly talk and maybe a little more detailed, depending on how much time we have.
And I know Len may have some other things he'd like to add
Yeah.
on that very point. But let's maintain a dialogue on this, because I think it's really important that we maintain a proactive position on this.
Any other questions of Anthony? Looks like then we're ready to move to the next chapter. Anthony, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Yeah, thank you again. Next up to speak about our Delta Flood ER grants is Zachary Vahola.
All right. How's that sound? We're good?
Great.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Zachary Vahola again, and I'd like to express our gratitude for allowing us to give you these program updates. I'm here primarily today to talk to you about the Delta Flood Emergency Response Grants that we offer through the Delta Flood Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Recovery Program, which is a kind of a mouthful. But anyways, got my slides in. So as Anthony mentioned before, Delta Flood ER grant, it's within the DFEPRRP component. You can see as up on the left as part of the many program components that we offer. I want to bring up one of the recommendations within the Delta plan that we hold near and dear to our hearts for the Delta grants, and this is to improve local levee maintaining agencies to build up a flood capacity and be able to have an emergency action plan, have material stockpiles available to them to have a plan of action in the event of an incident that occurs. People that are eligible for this grant application are California public agencies with the primary responsibility for flood emergency response and coordination within the legal delta. This is different from our sister grant, the statewide grants, which excludes the legal delta. This tries to focus in mainly on the reclamation districts, local maintaining agencies, flood control districts at the lowest level to build up their response capabilities. So we have up to $5 million available through this grant program through Proposition 1E funding. And our activities that we fund are prioritized within 3 steps. And I want to mention that this round of grants is the first of hopefully many in the future. We're trying to tackle the first step, which is the planning and coordination aspect. So developing emergency action plans, ensuring that the local agencies have SEMS, NIMS training for disaster relief reimbursement and recovery. So we anticipate within this round of grant applications to receive requests mainly for emergency action plan development and ICS-related training. Step 2 is more geared towards technical training, like flood fight response and advanced SIMS NIMS training. We have received requests for steps 2 and 3 within our applications, but we're trying to mainly focus on step 1 for this round. And then finally, step 3 is the facilities, equipment, supplies, trying to build up the physical capacity of these local agencies in the means of rock, flood fight materials, sand, twine, what have you. So our application period was a 60-day application period. We've gone through that. It started July 25th and ended September 23rd, and we have a total of 6 lead agency applicants, and these include the 5 major Delta counties as well as the San Joaquin County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. Looking at the spread for some of the applications, as we anticipated, there's been a large requested amount for planning in the Delta Emergency Action Plan development, trying to kind of have the locals express how they will utilize materials and training, develop training plans within the Delta, and as you can see, there's been a large interest within that component of these Delta grants. And we, as you can see, there are also, future kind of requested notes that people are starting to gear up and think about what kind of training plans they'll be requesting funding for or equipment and materials. So as you see the numbers there for training and equipment, those aren't the full amounts that we are expecting to receive for future rounds of grants. And I'd just like to point out that of the 6 main lead agencies that we received for our applications, we received 125 participating agencies requests under those lead agencies. So there's a lot of interest to receive funding for those activities. Looking at our schedule, as I mentioned, we just went through our application process, and we actually finished up our Tier 1 and Tier 2 evaluation for the applications that we have received. That began on September 24th, and we're currently trying to get the preliminary recommendations for funding approved through DWR executives. So once we do get that approved, we'll move on to a 30-day public comment period where applicants as well as the public will be able to ask us questions, and we will hopefully get to them and address all their questions. And then we're looking to finalize those funding recommendations in December, looking around December 19th. We're looking to begin contract development around January after we've made our final recommendations, and looking to sign contracts and implement those projects in March. So we'll be able to, once we implement the projects, get their quarterly progress reports to track the progress that's been made on these projects. And just a quick update about some of the other grant programs that we have running through our program. The Delta Emergency Communications Grant, which is a interoperability-focused grant to build up the communications ability within the legal Delta. As you can see, the 5 major Delta counties. These awards are in progress. They're in the project implementation phase, and we are receiving their quarterly reports. And this provides them with funding to purchase radio equipment, various other means of communication tools. So that's all I have for the Delta grants. Again, there's our website, and I'll give the floor back over to John and Bill, I guess.
Not yet. You've got some questions.
All right. I thought I'd dodge it.
So close to getting off.
I tried.
Zach, thank you again. With those grants for communications, how does that meet the county needs for emergency communications? Is that 100% of their currently identified needs?
I can't speak that much on the communications grant because I'm mainly focused on the Delta Flood ER grant, but I know Bill could probably answer a little bit better for you.
I'd be happy to answer that.
Sure.
So the Delta Communication Grant package was a pretty interesting process to go through. Sacramento County actually took a leadership role in what I would call herding the cats and really doing building the foundation of our interoperability communication plan for the Delta region as a whole, and doing that in concert with Cal OES and their statewide interoperability plan. And so part of that is really they reached out to each of the 5 counties and said, what are your needs to better communicate within the Delta? Is it radios? Is it cell phones? Internet access? Something we all talk about is the fancy red phone that we can all get on the phone at the same time and say this is a problem. So we call that kind of a technology hoot and holler type problem. And so also what were some of the critical communication challenges within the Delta? One of them, we've worked closely with the local LMA engineers, and they want their cell phones because that's how they communicate nowadays with their trucking facilities and their material supplies to deal with it there at the local level. So that's something that we made sure we put in that plan is how do we, if all of our cell phones go down like they always do and all these disasters, how do we reinforce that system? Can we have them hand them a radio and get back to business, or we actually do need to figure out how to reinforce our cell communication capacity within the Delta? So what happened was this project actually looked at all those different layers of communication and said, how do we actually deploy that, various types of technology to beef that up? And that's what this program has done. Does it meet their needs? Based on the Zach's Delta grant, is there a radio communication needs identified in this second round of grant funding? There is radios by each of the, I would say the core counties in excess of what their needs are, so that if needed, they can actually hand those to a local maintaining agency. Part of the Delta Grant emergency planning would put in your plan, how do you plan to use radio communications if your cell phone's going down? So they haven't really thought about how to do that, so now there's money for the radios, they're buying the radios, now they're going to get a plan, and now they're going to integrate the radio process into their emergency plans and how they interact, say, with the local maintaining agency. So are the needs met? It came pretty close. But I think there's narrow banding issues that have occurred with not just for our emergency managers, but for law enforcement. And so there's actually a huge need for kind of updating everyone's radio systems to make sure we all, including us, comply with the CCC or the FCC requirements. And so we've come a long ways. The $5 million went pretty far. We also, one of the kind of watershed or the kind of big showcase projects was building a communication tower at Twitchell Island. So the department is working with Sacramento County to put up a county tower to reinforce the communication between the 5 Delta counties, and they're making that tower available, say, to the department so we can enhance our own department communication needs on that tower. So we're working through the easements, and construction engineering's done, and they're going and purchasing the equipment to build that tower early next calendar year.
Is DWR the lead agency in coordinating these activities right now?
The communication grants are being led by Sacramento County as a whole, and working with the 5 Delta counties. We're the funding agent, so all 5 counties report to us. We have actually individual agreements with each of the counties, so they're all accountable for their own gear, so to speak. And so we're kind of pushing them to make sure that they meet their grant obligations for us, and that gets reported up through our bond accountability programs. Sacramento County is the chief cat herder on this effort, and then Sacramento County is working very closely with Cal OES Communications.
Thanks.
Bill, I want to congratulate you. There was a big deficiency that we identified 2 years ago, that you identified, the lack of the ability of somebody in Yolo County to communicate directly with somebody in Sacramento County because their radios were on different frequencies and if the cell phones went out. So congratulations on taking big steps forward to improve that. I recall during that same conversation that some volunteer fire department representatives came before us and indicated that they are likely to be the first responders to a flood emergency. And I presume that they're included in this communications loop. Is that correct?
They are, as well as law enforcement. And that's the benefit of this is an interesting process to go through. My office and my staff work directly with emergency managers every day. But when you go to the telecommunication group, which are critical to the emergency managers, they actually work to support their county operations in this case. So it's law enforcement, it's fire, it's public works, it's all of the business functions of a county. And so the emergency management gets the benefit of a robust county radio system. They all want their cell phones just like us, but in the end, we all rely on radios in this case, for emergency communications. And so the telecom groups within the 5 counties actually work at a kind of a different everyday pace, so kind of by default, you get law fire. Most of the time, that's a challenge because law fire kind of operates differently than emergency management. But through this group, because the emergency managers are involved, and they have a little bit different needs, it kind of caused the emergency, in my view, the emergency management community and the local law fire to kind of have to interact. And, well, wait, we all got to upgrade our narrowband our radios. We all have to be compliant. So we need to be on the same team. And so that's one of the things that's on the table right now which all of us have kind of pushed for, is 2 frequencies that we can all get on within the Delta region, what we call Flood 1 and Flood 2. We're not there yet, but we're now lined up to go talk with FCC to say, this from a regional perspective, if we got something going bad regionally, we have to be able to communicate with you. The new radios will allow us to do that, but there has been an identified need to get additional bandwidth. And so the narrowbanding actually allows us to have that conversation with FCC. We're going to work through Cal OES to make that happen. In Sacramento County, they're kind of pushing it, but it does bring in law fire. And for us, the fire department in the Delta is usually the first responder. But one of the challenges that we identified in the process, looking back at our after-action reports, is law can be a problem. Because when you do a mass evacuation of an area, especially in the Delta, they're going to lock down the roads. If I can't get through the roads, and we all can't get on the radio and communicate and say, my flood fighters are coming your way, don't stop them, that becomes a problem. And so we've actually integrated, some like Sacramento Sheriff will be participating with us in an exercise in the first week in November to make sure they kind of know who we are and the way we dress and the cars we drive, and so that we can actually get through barriers. And we understand the risks, they understand that we need to be there. And we hopefully radio communications and those banding crosstalk will work to help resolve that issue.
It's great.
Thank you. I wanted to kind of echo what Randy was saying. I know this council has focused on our co-equal goals, which is what we were supposed to do, but earthquake preparedness or emergency preparedness, just listening to the panel and listening to the discussion, I think we can all, especially those who live in the Delta, can sleep easier tonight. I commend all of you for what you're doing because it's such an important thing what you're doing, even with the communication. Something as simple as that. People don't think about that, but that is so important. The first responders, I really want to commend your efforts, and I know you will continue. So this is rewarding to hear this discussion because it's really a very important issue for the whole state and certainly for here, for the folks who live in the Delta. I do want to have a few questions about the grants that you're responsible for. What is the criteria? You mentioned there are 5 or 6 lead agencies and about 125 requests. Is it a priority you're setting for those? For what you're looking at when you do that?
So a large incentive that we're trying to provide through this grant program is to have the local agencies comply with Water Code Law 9650. And we use the criteria, the minimum criteria required through 9650, including the 5 areas, have inventory of flood fight materials, flood fight plans, dewatering plan, essential service areas such as jails, fire, and hospitals to be operable after a large scale event. And then we're kind of gearing that towards our grants to provide incentive for these local agencies to become funded and to comply with the law. So.
And just a final statement is that there are so many good things that are going on in the Delta to help mitigate these issues, and just the fact that we're hearing it and having that discussion, I think is just commendable. And again, thank you.
I just wanted to add that the Delta Flood ER grants reinforces the state's standardized emergency management system of emergencies starting at the local level and building up through the county, regionally up to the state. So there's 6 lead agencies, and 5 of those lead agencies in our grant application package were the 5 operational areas, the 5 counties. And underneath all those counties, they had numerous participants. For example, San Joaquin County had 52 participants. The vast majority of those reclamation districts within San Joaquin County. So even through the application process and as we administer these grants, we're reinforcing SEMS and promoting local reclamation districts working through their counties with the state with the state partners.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I don't know if we have time to get back to the overall strategy. I'd be happy to come back at a later date too and kind of go over some of those watershed things.
We probably ought to keep the ball rolling at this point, but we can catch up on this because I think it's an important
I think we'd want to do that if we could.
Excellent.
You're going to bring all these guys back with you?
We'll be back, whoever you want. I got a great team.
That's right.
Okay.
Come on back.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate it a great deal. Mr. Marino, you're sitting down there looking innocent.
Thank you, Chairman Eisenberg. Thank you for inviting me back. Seeing that last time I was here a year ago to the date, and I brought you all that bad news. And I wanted to introduce a member of my staff as well, Mr. Kurt Terrace, in the fancy suit back there.
Are you sending him out to deal with all the property owners that are encroaching on levees?
Well, we haven't told him about that yet, but probably. Anyway, he's kind of our go-to guy on the flood board staff for all things Delta. And I wanted to introduce him today so you get to know him because you'll be seeing him around. You could put the PowerPoint up, or you can follow along in your bright blue handouts here.
We've got it, and I think our staff has it too somewhere.
Okay.
There we go.
First, we'll start off with the map of the jurisdictional Delta. We have 3 types of facilities within the Delta that the Flood Board regulates. The first is the designated floodways, and there's really only 2 of them. The second is the regulated streams, which are all the little red spaghetti lines that you see all over the place. And those are basically all the natural channels. And the third, which is the subject matter of today's presentation, is the project levies that were were adopted by the Corps and are under assurance agreements with the board. So my top sheet here is a kind of a scoreboard of where we're at now with respect to the periodic inspections that have taken place to date. There are 28 levee systems within the Delta. At the present time, 12 of them remain in active status in the rehabilitation and inspection program.
And active status means?
Active status means that if there is a flood disaster, the Corps will fund assistance.
So they kept their eligibility?
They kept their eligibility, and they will be rebuilt with federal funding. If they are inactive, they are basically you're basically out of luck, and the Corps will not spend money to rebuild them. However, I must emphasize that the Corps will always be there for flood fighting assistance, whether it's a project levy or a local levy. It doesn't matter. The Corps will be there. And Ryan Marston from the Corps reminded me to tell you guys that today. So.
Have there been changes in active, inactive number of levee systems in the last year?
Yes, there have. The 28 levee systems that we have here, the inspection process has proceeded since we last spoke. And now there are a total of 15 inactive and one partially inactive. And the reason it's partially inactive is because the Corps hasn't really gotten around to inspecting it on their 5-year cycle yet. But we believe that once it is inspected under the newer criteria, it will become inactive. So we have 12 to basically 16 at this point.
Okay.
Now the next 6 slides I can kind of wing through kind of fast, but these are really, really detailed, and I'm not sure if the council is wanting to get this deep in the weeds on all these little things. But one common pattern that you're going to see in all of these systems is that one of the things that fails out is the encroachments. And these are the structures or things that people put in levees or around levees or on levees that are unacceptable to the Corps of Engineers and not included in their operations and maintenance manual. And therefore, the Corps believes that they could result in a levee failure during a high water event. So one of the, on this slide here, if you look down at the bottom, the Pewter Creek Yolo Bypass Willow Slough Unit 2, one of the things, real typical type of failure mechanism is erosion and bank caving. These levees have not seen a lot of maintenance over the years, and you really can't blame it all on the locals. You can blame some of it, but you can't blame all of it because a lot of these levees were adopted by the Corps, and they weren't really much of a levee to begin with. They didn't have the modern engineering principles used to design and build them. And they were basically just plowed up earth that the residents of the Delta at the time used to fight floods. So in the next few slides we have more of the same. And so I'll just go through these kind of fast here. The active levees that we have here, the 12 of them, we believe that they're in pretty good shape and they can get through another inspection cycle, and hopefully they will not undergo an inactive status at that point. But what I wanted to get to here was we're at the point now where it's really time to fish or cut bait. So what the board staff is doing is we're asking the local maintaining agencies that have inactive levee systems within their boundaries to let us know what their intent is. We want to know, do you intend to remove the deficiencies yourself and comply with the PL 8499 and thereby get back into the system? And we would like to know by October 30th, so we'll have a better handle on that in the weeks ahead. This will help us prioritize which levees we're going to spend our resources and time on to help the residents get back in the system. what we typically find in a lot of places is we don't get any responses. We get silence, and we don't know what the intent of the local maintaining agency is. And in some cases, the local maintaining agency exists on paper only, and there really is no one there. It's just, there's no maintenance at all being done. So we're giving them an opportunity to tell us what they want to do, whether they want to stay, get back in the system. And we use this kind of check sheet here to basically ask them to bubble in the box that they want to pursue. And, the first line on there is we'd like them to consider filing a letter of intent with us to undergo a statewide improvement framework plan.
An LOI for a SWIFT.
An LOI that's a letter of intent. Yeah, in core speak, this is very common lexicon, and you'll find that whenever you're talking to anybody on my staff or with the Corps. The letters of intent are big business right now, and we're trying to get as many of these levee systems that have failed out of the program back into the program. And it's basically saying if you file a letter of intent that you're going to undergo the SWIFT plan, you're basically back in the program instantly.
Are you finding that the district, I assume some of these districts simply don't respond, as you've indicated?
Yes.
Typically don't. Are they also likely to be ones with encroachment problems as well as general levee conditions?
Well, they all have encroachment problems.
Okay.
That's,
one extent or another.
That in one system or another. And what we're finding is that the smaller rural ones either don't respond or they respond that they can't do anything about it because they don't have the money. And so it's not really their fault. It's a funding issue. And in some cases, it could be an environmental issue where they can't do the grading and levee geometry work that they need to do because they're running afoul of the Endangered Species Act. Vegetation, huge area of disagreement between the state and the Corps. We could talk for hours about that, but so.
Ms. Gray?
Mr. Marino, 15 or 16 that are inactive, you said that they can apply to get back into the system.
Yes.
And so that effort is going on right now. Do you have any idea how many more and kind of what happens if they can't get back in? Maybe it's a real simple question, but what happens?
Well, we can help them make that determination. We have a whole procedure on our website, and we sent out hard copy letters to all of the local maintaining agencies that did receive inactive notices from the Corps during the last periodic or continuing eligibility inspections. And like I said, it's hard to get answers back from some of the smaller ones that are chronically underfunded. And so we're working with them to see if there's anything we can do. One of the alternatives is that let the state take them over. That's prohibitively expensive because of the geographical location of some of these local maintaining agencies. It's very difficult for state forces to get to these levees where they can actually perform any kind of maintenance because of the proximity of the yard, the equipment yard, to where the levees are. So it's always more cost effective to let the locals do it themselves, and we really encourage that. But in some cases it might be the solution would be to have a state take it over. So we give the local maintaining agencies that option. We're not forcing it on anybody. We're just asking them, what do you want to do? And one option is to drop out of the federal system altogether, and then the Corps won't come knocking at your door anymore.
And will the state of California financially then cover their losses?
I'm not really in a position to say that, but
I mean, by the way, refresh my memory. These are non-project levies.
No, these are project levies. These are project levies.
Project levies.
Yes.
If the feds aren't going to be reimbursed and the people either withdraw or fail to respond, I mean, the Paterno case, even though it's not exactly the same thing, suggests that if we kind of sit around and wait for reason to guide behavior and changes in behavior, we're likely to be stuck with a bill. So aren't all the economic incentives against the state at this time? Fed's out.
I would have to agree with you, Chairman Eisenberg. What happens is if they decide to opt out of the federal system, I'm sure our legal eagles would take care of it. They would declare the assurance agreement that the local signed with the state to be null and void.
Well, rather than tossing all the issues over to litigation that'll sure to occur if we ever get into that situation, I wonder whether this isn't comparable to local nuisance abatement activity that goes on all the time in America on local matters. Weeds overgrown on property, unsafe conditions, storage of dump trucks, the whole routine that a county or a city would. I mean, it seems to me, if the state is sitting there aren't, there are these islands, but the notion that you kind of wait for the locals to ask for state assumption when they have no financial motivation to do that is best. I understand the position from your testimony.
Right.
I mean,
we understand that, but we want to give the locals the option to tell us what they want to do first before we get heavy-handed.
Of these remaining 13 or 15 districts, how many have failed to respond?
I don't have that statistic in front of me, but I will have a very good indication of the response we're getting to our latest go-round of queries in about a month.
Mr. Knopf, just a suggestion on this small issue of these levies and either failure to response or unwillingness or inability to pay. I'd flag that for an issue in the investment strategy discussion. I don't want to claim that this is an earth-shaking, no pun intended, in any way, magnitude, but it's one of those things. Just the Delta must be full of little discrete problems like this that relate to levees, and we might want to take a crack at some standards and ideas on this one as a way into the larger array of complex issues.
Right.
Okay.
Well, when the Corps, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
No, go finish your.
When the Corps started these inspection processes about 2 or 3 years ago, the board, the new board was then seated about a year and a half ago, and they realized that the enforcement ability of the board is not as good as it should be. So I'm kind of getting to that here on the slide here where I'm talking about the tools for resolving levy deficiencies. I already covered number one pretty thoroughly, which is to submit and going the SWIFT process through the Corps of Engineers. The second one is to consider the Department of Water Resources has a flood system repair project in which they will cost share with LMAs in the non-urban areas to repair documented problems within state plan of flood control facilities. And this is, it's kind of, it uses Proposition 1E money, and it's a follow-on to the early implementation projects, which were really successful in the past 5 years or so. And but there's not a lot of money left in this program, and it is specifically geared toward non-urban levees, such as those in the Delta. And just coincidentally, we're having a full presentation on this at our board meeting tomorrow at City Hall. And it's agenda item 11A. So if anybody's interested in learning about the flood system repair project, come on down.
Len, I did have one question for you.
Yes,
I didn't want to open this can of worms, so I'm going to tread lightly. But the vegetation on levees issue is a big one. And I'm just wondering, is there any active process underway right now with the Army Corps to come up with a modified proposal that would allow vegetation on levees?
There's a lot of work being done right now by the Department's Division of Flood Management on the vegetation variants that you're talking about, and there is a dialogue going on. They have not made a lot of progress, to be honest with you, and they're considering other options at this point, which I don't really think I'm at liberty to discuss. But they're looking at a lot of different ways to get around this issue.
Do the options include chaining you to valuable trees on levees, Mr. Marino?
Maybe my coworker in the back row, but not me. No, I'm too old for that. Okay, a really important point I wanted to make today, which is basically spawned by the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, which was passed in June of 2012, created this regional flood management planning process. And two of the active work groups reside within the Delta. And I've furnished the contact information to your staff, and I really encourage Delta staff and local maintaining agencies to get involved in this process, because this is the process where you can identify flood control and improvement processes for levees and other things to get you back into the PL 8499 and also increase your flood protection. And what these regional work groups are doing is they're putting together ideas and plans, and they're prioritizing them. And this process is going on right now. And so I really encourage you. This is your best chance to get things fixed and get some projects done that have been lingering for a really long time. And if you need any information about that, I'd be happy to answer those questions as well.
Okay.
And you probably heard about our recent success in getting Senate Bill 753 passed. And this kind of speaks to the encroachment issue that we were talking about before. When this board was seated, they realized that they had a big job to do, and we really weren't that well tooled up to deal with all these encroachment issues that we're finding, that the Corps is finding for us in these periodic inspections. And we knew about them. It's just that there's literally thousands of them, including the famous wine cellar in Pewter Creek's levee. So recently this legislation was approved by the legislature and signed by the governor. It goes into effect on January 1st, and the staff is at the present time writing the regulations under Title 23 to help the existing regulations conform to the intent of the Water Code legislation update. And we're finally going to have some teeth in the tiger now. The new legislation gives the board the ability to levy fines, to put liens on property, and to remove encroachments for people if they don't do it voluntarily. We always encourage voluntary compliance, but in cases where we don't get return phone calls or we just get, we're ignored, we have the ability to go in and do it for them and send them a bill or put a lien on their property.
That's the abatement process
applied for you. That's part of the abatement process, but we don't have unlimited budget to do this kind of thing. So, but at last we have a way where we can go ahead and take something down that's causing an entire levee system to be removed from PL 8499, and so we're going to use this legislation to help us win some of these levee systems back.
Supervisor Rustaller.
How's the swimming pool?
Swimming pools, I think I know which one you're talking about. Yeah, the swimming pool issue, we've been working with those folks, and they are not returning phone calls anymore. So I've kicked it upstairs to the 11th floor to my legal eagles, and I'm going to let them wrestle with it.
Could I make a request, please? When the law goes into effect on January 1st with expanded authority, could I have a photograph of your chairman with his hard hat and reflector vest walking the levees?
We can probably get you.
Laws. I'd really like that.
We can probably get you one of those before that.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Len.
If you have any questions, that's all I had for
Just
today.
one quick question. At the current pace of activity on levee maintenance, how long before we're pretty much universally across the Delta at least at PL 8499 standards?
I can't answer that because it really depends on how much money we can get and how soon. It's really going to be, if we have a water bond put on the ballot in 2014 and it's something that looks something like Proposition 1E, and we can put together some levee programs that will rebuild and restore levees, then there's a good chance we'll be on track to get some of these things fixed within the next 5-10 years. That's basically what it takes. Is you have to have guidelines. It's a very public process, as you know. You have to put the guidelines together, have all kinds of public vettings of these things, and then prioritize the project, then go out and fix them.
Thank you. Okay, other questions? All right, stick there. Mr.